Chapter 26, The Science of Kriya Yoga. The science of Kriya Yoga, mentioned so often in these pages, became widely known in modern India through the instrumentality of Lahiri Mahasaya, my guru's guru. The Sanskrit root of Kriya is Kri, to do, to act, and react. The same root is found in the word karma, the natural principle of cause and effect. Kriya Yoga is thus union yoga with the infinite through a certain action or rite, kriya. A yogi who faithfully practices the technique is gradually freed from karma, or the lawful chain of cause and effect equilibriums. Because of certain ancient yogic injunctions, I may not give a full explanation of Kriya Yoga in a book intended for the general public. The actual technique should be learned from an authorized Kriyoban, Kriya Yogi, of Self-Realization Fellowship, Yogoda Satsanga Society of India. Here a broad reference must suffice. Here's a footnote about that. Paramahansa Yogananda conferred on those who would succeed him as president and spiritual head of his society, Self-Realization Fellowship, Yogoda Satsanga Society of India, the authority to bestow Kriya Yoga instruction and initiation on eligible students, or to appoint and ordain SRF YSS minister to do so. He also provided for the perpetual dissemination of the Kriya Yoga science through his Self-Realization Fellowship, Yogoda, lessons, available from the SRF International Headquarters in Los Angeles. See page 551, publisher's note. Kriya Yoga is a simple psychophysiological method by which human blood is decarbonated and recharged with oxygen. The atoms of this extra oxygen are transmuted into life current to rejuvenate the brain and spinal centers. By stopping the accumulation of venous blood, the yogi is able to lessen or prevent the decay of tissues. The advanced yogi transmutes his cells into energy. Elijah, Jesus, Kabir, and other prophets were past masters in the use of Kriya, or a similar technique, by which they cause their bodies to materialize and dematerialize at will. Kriya is an ancient science. Lahiri Mahasaya received it from his great guru, Babaji, who rediscovered and clarified the technique after it had been lost in the Dark Ages. Babaji renamed it simply Kriya Yoga. The Kriya Yoga that I'm giving to the world through you in this 19th century, Babaji told Lahiri Mahasaya, is a revival of the same science that Krishna gave millenniums ago to Arjuna, and that was later known to Patanjali and Christ, and to St. John, St. Paul, and other disciples. Kriya Yoga is twice referred to by Lord Krishna, India's greatest prophet, in the Bhagavad Gita. One stanza reads, offering the inhaling breath into the exhaling breath, and offering the exhaling breath into the inhaling breath, the yogi neutralizes both breaths. Thus, he releases prana from the heart and brings life force under his control. And that is from Bhagavad Gita 4:29. The interpretation is, the yogi arrests decay in the body by securing an additional supply of prana, life force, through quieting the actions of the lungs and heart. He also arrests mutations of growth in the body by control of apana, eliminating current. Thus, neutralizing decay and growth, the yogi learns life force control. Another Gita stanza states that meditation expert Muni becomes eternally free, who, seeking the supreme goal, is able to withdraw from external phenomena by fixing his gaze within the mid-spot of the eyebrows, and by neutralizing the even currents of prana and apana that flow within the nostrils and lungs, and to control his sensory mind and intellect, and to banish desire, fear, and anger. And here's a footnote about that. a bit 527-28. See pages 537, 539 to 41 for further explanations about the science of breath. Krishna also relates that it was he in a former incarnation who communicated the indestructible yoga to an ancient illuminato, Vivavat, who gave it to Manu, the great legislator. Here's a footnote about that, a bit 4:1 to 2. That's about the Krishna footnote. And then the great legislator footnote, the anti-historical author of Manava Dharma Shastra, or Laws of Manu. These institutes of canonized common law are effective in India to this day. He in turn instructed Ikshwaku, founder of India's solar war dynasty. Passing thus from one to another, the royal yoga was guarded by the rishis until the coming of the materialistic ages. Then, because of priestly secrecy and man's indifference, the sacred lore gradually became inaccessible. Here is a footnote about that. The start of the materialistic ages, according to Hindu scriptural reckoning, was 3102 BC. That year was the beginning of the last descending Dwapara Yuga of the equinoctial cycle, and also the start of the Kali Yuga of the universal cycle. See page 187-88. Most anthropologists, believing that 10,000 years ago, humanity was living in a barbarous Stone Age, summarily dismissed as myths the widespread traditions of very ancient civilizations of Lemuria, Atlantis, India, China, Japan, Egypt, Mexico, and many other lands. Then, because of priestly read that already. Okay, next paragraph. Kriya Yoga is mentioned twice by the ancient sage Patanjali, foremost exponent of yoga, who wrote, Kriya Yoga consists of body discipline, mental control, and meditating on Om. Here's a footnote about Om, I think. Yoga Sutras 2:1. In using the words Kriya Yoga, Patanjali was referring either to the technique later taught by Babaji or to one very similar. That Patanjali was mentioning a definite technique of life force control is proved by his aphorism in Yoga Sutra 249, cited on the following page. Patanjali speaks of God as the actual cosmic sound of Om that is heard in meditation. Here's a footnote about that, a bit 127. Om is the creative word, the whir of the vibratory motor, the witness of divine presence. And here's a footnote about that. These things saith the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of the creation of God. Revelation chapter 3, verse 14. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things were made by him, the Word, or Om. And I said Om as opposed to Om, O-M, which is different, Om. And without him was not anything made that was made. John chapter 1, verses 1 to 3. Om of the Vedas became the sacred word Hum of the Tibetans, Amen of the Muslims, and Amen of the Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, Jews, and Christians. Its meaning in Hebrew is sure, faithful. Even the beginner in yoga may soon hear the wondrous sound of Om. Through this blissful spiritual encouragement, he becomes convinced that he is in communion with spiritual realms. Patanjali refers a second time to the Kriya technique, or life force control. Thus, liberation can be attained by that pranayama, which is accomplished by joining the course of inspiration and expiration. And here's a footnote about that, can be found in Yoga Sutras 249. I wonder if that means chapter 2, verse 49. I don't know, I'm not sure. Anyways, St. Paul knew Kriya Yoga, or similar technique, by which he could switch life currents to and from the senses. He was therefore able to say, I protest by our rejoicing which I have in Christ. I die daily. Here's a footnote about that. It was found in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 31. Our rejoicing is the correct translation, not as usually given, your rejoicing. St. Paul was referring to the universality of the Christ consciousness. By a method of centering inwardly all bodily life force, which ordinarily is directed only outwardly to the sensory world, thus lending it a seeming validity, St. Paul experienced daily a true yoga union with the rejoicing bliss of the Christ consciousness. In that felicitous state, he was conscious of being dead to or freed from sensory delusions, the world of Maya. In the initial states of God communion, Sabikalpa Sadmahi, the devotee's consciousness emerges in the cosmic spirit. His life force is withdrawn from the body, which appears dead or motionless and rigid. The yogi is fully aware of his bodily condition of suspended animation. As he progresses to higher spiritual states, Nirvikalpa Samadhi, however, he communes with God without bodily fixation. And in his ordinary waking consciousness, even in the midst of exacting worldly duties. Here's a footnote about that. The Sanskrit word vikalpa means difference, non-identity. Sabikalpa is the state of samadhi with difference. Nirvikalpa is the state without difference. That is, in Sabikalpa Samadhi, the devotee still retains a slight feeling of separateness from God. In Nirvikalpa Samadhi, he realizes fully his identity as spirit. Kriya Yoga is an instrument through which human evolution can be quickened. Sri Yukteswar explained in his students, the ancient yogis discovered that the secret of cosmic consciousness is intimately linked with breath mastery. This is India's unique and deathless contribution to the world's treasury of knowledge. The life force, which is ordinarily absorbed in maintaining heart action, must be freed for higher activities by a method of calming and stilling the ceaseless demands of the breath. The Kriya Yogi mentally directs his life energy to revolve upward and downward around the 6 spinal centers: medullary, cervical, dorsal, lumbar, sacral, and coccygeal plexuses, which correspond to the 12 astral signs of the zodiac, the symbolic cosmic man. 1/2 minute of evolution of energy around the sensitive spinal cord of man affects subtle progress in his evolution. The 1/2 minute of Kriya equals 1 year of natural spiritual unfoldment. The astral system of the human being, with 6/12 bipolarity inner constellations revolving around the sun of the omniscient spiritual eye, is interrelated with the physical sun and the 12 zodiacal signs. All men are thus affected by an inner and outer universe. The ancient rishis discovered that man's earthly and heavenly environment and a series of 12-year cycles push him forward on his natural path. The scriptures aver that man requires 1,000,000 years of normal, diseaseless evolution to perfect his human brain and attain cosmic consciousness. 1,000 kriyas practiced in 8.5 hours gives the yogi in one day the equivalent of 1,000 years of natural evolution. 365,000 years of evolution in 1 year. In 3 years, a Kriya Yogi can thus accomplish by intelligent self-effort the same result that nature brings to pass in 1,000,000 years. The Kriya shortcut, of course, can be taken only by deeply developed yogis. With the guidance of a guru, such yogis have carefully prepared their body and brain to withstand the power generated by intensive practice. The Kriya beginner employs his yogic technique only 14 to 24 times, twice daily. A number of yogis achieve emancipation in 6 or 12 or 24 or 48 years. A yogi who dies before achieving full realization carries with him the good karma of his past Kriya effort. In his new life, he is naturally propelled toward his infinite goal. The body of an average man is like a 50-watt lamp, which cannot accommodate the billion watts of power roused by an excessive force or an excessive practice of Kriya. Through gradual and regular increase of the simple and foolproof methods of Kriya, man's body becomes astrally transformed day by day and is finally fitted to express the infinite potentials of cosmic energy, which constitutes the first materially active expression of spirit. Kriya Yoga has nothing in common with the unscientific breathing exercises taught by a number of misguided zealots. Attempts to hold breath forcibly in the lungs are unnatural and decidedly unpleasant. Kriya practice, on the other hand, is accompanied from the very beginning by feelings of peace and by soothing sensations of regenerative effect in the spine. The ancient yogic technique converts the breath into mind stuff. By spiritual advancement, one is able to cognize the breath as a mental concept, an act of mind, a dream breath. Many illusions could be given of the mathematical relationship between man's respiratory rate and the variations in his states of consciousness. A person whose attention is fully engrossed, as in following some closely knit intellectual argument or in attempting some delicate or difficult physical feat, automatically breathes very slowly. Fixity of attention depends on slow breathing. Quick or uneven breaths are an inevitable accompaniment of harmful emotional states, fear, lust, anger. The restless monkey breathes at a rate of 32 times a minute, in contrast to man's average of 18 times. The elephant, tortoise, snake, and other creatures noted for their longevity have a respiratory rate that is less than man's. The giant tortoise, for instance, may attain the age of 300 years, breathes only 4 times a minute. The rejuvenating effects of sleep are due to man's temporary unawareness of body and breathing. The sleeping man becomes a yogi. Each night, he unconsciously performs the yogic rite of releasing himself from bodily identification and of merging the life force with healing currents in the main brain region and in the 6 sub-dynamos of his spinal centers. Unknowingly, the sleeper is thus recharged by the cosmic energy that sustains all life. The voluntary yogi performs a simple, natural process consciously, not unconsciously, like the slow-paced sleeper. The Kriya Yogi uses his technique to saturate and feed all his physical cells with undecayable light and thus to keep them in a spiritually magnetized condition. He scientifically makes breathing unnecessary and does not enter during his hours of practice the negative states of sleep, unconsciousness, or death. In men, under Maya or natural law, the flow of life energy is toward the outward world. The currents are wasted and abused in the senses. The practice of Kriya reverses the flow. Life force is mentally guided to the inner cosmos and becomes reunited with subtle spinal energies. By such reinforcement of life force, the yogi's body and brain cells are renewed by a spiritual elixir. Through proper food, sunlight, and harmonious thoughts, men who are led only by nature and her divine plan will achieve self-realization in 1,000,000 years. 12 years of normal, healthful living are required to effect even slight refinements in brain structure. 1,000,000 solar returns are exacted to purify the cerebral tenement sufficiently for manifestation of cosmic consciousness. A Kriya yogi, however, by use of a spiritual science, removes himself from the necessity for a long period of careful observation of natural laws. Untying the cord of breath that binds the soul to the body, Kriya serves to prolong life and to enlarge the consciousness to infinity. The yoga technique overcomes the tug of war between the mind and the matter-entangled senses and frees the devotee to re-inherit his eternal kingdom. He knows then that his real being is bound neither by physical encasement nor by breath, symbol of mortal man's enslavement to air, to nature's elemental compulsions. Master of his body and mind, the Kriya Yogi ultimately achieves victory over the last enemy, death. Here's a footnote about that. The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. 1 Corinthians 15:26. The incorruptibility of Paramahansa Yogananda's body after death, see page 548, proved him a perfected Kriya Yogi. Not all great masters, however, manifest bodily non-decay after death. See page 340 note. Such miracles occur, the Hindu scriptures tell us, only for some special purpose. In Paramahansa's case, the special purpose was doubtless to convince the West of the value of yoga. Yogananda had been commanded by Babaji and Sri Yukteswar to serve the West. Paramahansa fulfilled that trust both in his life and in his death. Publisher's note. So shalt thou feed on death that feeds on men, and death once dead, there's no more dying then. And this quote is from Shakespeare, Sonnet 146. Introspection, or sitting in the silence, is an unscientific way of trying to force apart the mind and senses, tied together by the life force. Contemplative mind, attempting to return to divinity, is constantly dragged back toward the senses by the life currents. Kriya, controlling the mind directly through the life force, is the easiest, most effective, and most scientific avenue of approach to the infinite. In contrast to the slow, uncertain bullock cart theological path to God, Kriya Yoga might justly be called the airplane route. This yogic science is based on an empirical consideration of all forms of concentration and meditation techniques. Yoga enables the devotee to switch off or on at will life current to the 5 sense telephones of sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. Attaining this power of sense disconnection, the yogi finds it simple to unite his mind at will with divine realms or with the world of matter. No longer is he unwillingly brought back by the life force to the mundane sphere of rowdy sensations and restless thoughts. The life of an advanced Kriya yogi is influenced not by effects of past actions, but solely by directions from the soul. The devotee thus avoids the slow evolutionary monitors of egoistic actions, good and bad, of common life, cumbrous and snail-like to the ego hearts. The superior method of soul living frees the yogi. Emerging from his ego prison, he tastes the deep air of omnipresence. The thraldom of natural living is, in contrast, set in a pace humiliating. Conforming his life merely to the evolutionary order, a man can command no concessionary haste from nature. Though he live without error against the laws that govern his body and mind, he still requires 1,000,000 years of masquerading incarnations to attain final emancipation. The telescopic methods of a yogi disengaging himself from physical and mental identifications in favor of soul individuality are therefore commended to those who eye with revolt 1,000,000 years. This numerical periphery is enlarged for the ordinary man, who lives in harmony not even with nature, let alone his soul, pursuing instead unnatural complexities and offending in his thoughts and body the sweet sanities of nature. For him, 2 times 1,000,000 years can scarce suffice for liberation. Gross man seldom or never realizes that his body is a kingdom governed by Emperor Soul on the throne of the cranium, with subsidiary regions in the 6 spinal centers or spheres of consciousness. This theocracy extends over a throng of obedient subjects, 27,000 billion cells endowed with sure, if seemingly automatic intelligence, by which they perform all duties of bodily growths, transformations, and dissolutions, and 50 million substratal thoughts, emotions, and variations of alternating phases in man's consciousness in an average life of 60 years. Any apparent insurrection in the human body or mind against Emperor Soul, manifesting as disease or irrationality, is due to no disloyalty among the humble subjects, but stems from past or present misuse by man of his individuality or free will, given to him simultaneously with a soul and revocable never. Identifying himself with a shallow ego, man takes for granted that it is he who thinks, wills, feels, digests meals, and keeps himself alive, never admitting through reflection, only a little would suffice, that in his ordinary life he is not but a puppet of past actions, karma, and of nature or environment. Each man's intellectual reactions, feelings, moods, and habits are merely effects of past causes, whether of this or a prior life. Lofty above such influences, however, is his regal soul. Spurning the transitory truths and freedoms, the Kriya Yogi passes beyond all disillusionment into his unfettered being. The world's scriptures declare man to be not a corruptible body, but a living soul. In Kriya Yoga, he finds a method to prove the scriptural affirmation. Outward ritual cannot destroy ignorance because they are not mutually contradictory, wrote Shankara in his famous century of verses. Realized knowledge alone destroys ignorance. Knowledge cannot spring up by any other means than inquiry. Who am I? How is this universe born? Who is his maker? What is its material cause? Is this the kind of inquiry? This is the kind of inquiry referred to. The intellect has no answer for these questions. Hence, the rishis evolved yoga as a technique of spiritual inquiry. The true yogi, withholding his thoughts, will, and feelings from false identification with bodily desires, uniting his mind with supraconscious forces in the spinal shrines, thus lives in the world as God hath planned. He is impelled neither by impulses from the past, nor by fresh motivations of human witlessness. Receiving fulfillment of his supreme desire, he is safe in the final haven of inexhaustibly blissful spirit. Referring to the sure and methodical efficacy of yoga, Krishna praises the technological yogi in the following words. The yogi is greater than body disciplining ascetics, greater even than the followers of the path of wisdom, jnana yoga, or the path of action, karma yoga. Be thou, O disciple Arjuna, a yogi. And here's a footnote about that. It's from Bhagavad Gita 646. Modern science is beginning to discover the truly extraordinary curative and rejuvenating effects on mind and body of non-breathing. Dr. Alvin L. Barak of the College of Physicians and Surgeons in New York has originated a local lung rest therapy that is restoring to health many tuberculosis sufferers. The use of an equalizing pressure chamber enables the patient to stop breathing. The New York Times of February 1st, 1947, quoted Dr. Barak as follows: "The effect of cessation of breathing on the central nervous system is of considerable interest. The impulse for movement of the voluntary muscles in the extremities is strikingly diminished. The patient may lie in the chamber for hours without moving his hands or changing position. The desire to smoke disappears when voluntary respiration stops, even in patients who have been accustomed to smoke 2 packages of cigarettes daily. In many instances, the relaxation is of such a nature that the patient does not require amusement." In 1951, Dr. Barak publicly confirmed the value of the treatment, which he said not only rests the lungs, but also the entire body and seemingly the mind. The heart, for example, has its work decreased by 1/3. Our subjects stop worrying, none feel bored. From these facts, one begins to understand how it is possible for yogis to sit motionless for long periods without mental or bodily urge toward restless activity. Only by such quietude may the soul find its way back to God. Though ordinary men must remain in an equalizing pressure chamber to obtain certain benefits of non-breathing, the yogi needs nothing but the Kriya Yoga technique to receive rewards in body and mind and in soul awareness. Kriya Yoga is the real fire rite, oft extolled in the Gita. The yogi casts his human longings into a monotheistic bonfire consecrated to the unparalleled God. This is indeed the true yogic fire ceremony in which all past and present desires are fueled, consumed by divine love, by love divine. The ultimate flame receives sacrifice of all human madness. The man is pure of dross, his metaphorical bones stripped of all desirous flesh, his karmic skeleton bleached by the antiseptic sun of wisdom, inoffensive before man and maker, he is clean at last. End of chapter